I was in grade 7 when I first learned about climate change, or global warming, as we were still calling it at the time. My science teacher had watched An Inconvenient Truth and gave us a rundown of it in class the next day. I had a lot of questions about what I was hearing. Global warming? What do you mean the Earth is just getting hotter? And most crucially for me at the time, what does this mean for the tobogganing season? Thankfully, he also told us about some of the ways that we can help stop the warming. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Turn off the lights when you're not using them. Ride your bike instead of driving your car. As a group of grade 7 students, I think that last one was the easiest for us to get behind. I'll admit that I was scared, but I was ready to hop on my bike and solve climate change. When I was in my second year of university, I switched my major to wildlife biology and conservation. I was enamored with animals and natural processes, but my main motivation for doing that was because I, like so many people my age, and like so many of you, I imagine, in the audience today, was terrified of the looming climate crisis. I wanted to make a difference. And in that program, I learned about ecological interactions, about biogeochemistry, and about the engaging world of wildlife population modeling. What I didn't learn was how to solve climate change. When I graduated university, I'll admit that I was feeling a little hopeless. I'd spent so long fearing what was coming. I'd ridden my bike. I'd recycled. I'd even gone a step further and lobbied the government to create national parks. But I didn't feel like I'd made any impact at all. I was craving a way to create some sort of meaningful, tangible climate action. And then, a month after graduating, I got a job offer, and everything changed. Up until this point, I'd been feeling discouraged by modern conservation efforts. Everything seemed to me to either be too big or too small. On one end of the extreme, you have actions undertaken by governments, international agreements, and national and international level charities. These types of activities, things like large-scale land conservation and legislative changes, are extremely valuable in combating the climate crisis. But they have a key flaw: their speed. These projects tend to be large endeavors with lots of stakeholders and fundraising and negotiation involved. Yes, the fruits of these labors are extremely valuable when it comes to combating the climate crisis, but they bear the risk that by the time enough of them are complete, it's going to be too late to make a difference. You know, we may not have until 2050 to become carbon neutral. We may not have until 2030 to protect 30% of our land and water. When it comes to the climate crisis, time is of the essence. The other extreme places the responsibility for combating the climate crisis on the individual. These individual level actions are things that we're all familiar with. You know, it's the same sage advice that my science teacher gave me all those years ago. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Ride your bike, and all the other little ways that we can lessen our own carbon footprint. An individual can decide to do any one of these actions in an instant, but they're faced with a problem of scale. You see, without mass scale buy-in, individual action is a mitigating factor at best. Yes, these are strategies that are quick and easy to implement, but without mass scale buy-in, without most people in the world contributing, these individuals and their actions simply aren't going to stop the climate crisis. Now, you don't need me to get up here and tell you that staring down the barrel of the climate crisis is incredibly daunting. We know that individual action only goes so far, and that legislative change can be slow and fraught with complications. Understandably, this leaves a lot of people feeling lost and hopeless in the face of this grand existential threat. So how can we come together to create meaningful change? The answer, I believe, lies not at the national scale, nor at the individual scale, but at the intersection between the two. Earlier, I mentioned a job offer that changed everything. That was when I was hired by the Thousand Islands Watershed Land Trust, also known as TWILT and the world of local-scale conservation opened up before my eyes. It was only once I worked for, and eventually came to run, a community-focused conservation group that I realized that land trusts can be a key to bridging the gap between the extremes of climate action. Now, the philosophy of a land trust is very simple. We work with willing landowners to turn rural properties into privately held protected areas that are conserved in perpetuity, or, as Twilt might say, forever. In doing this, we ensure that these properties can be conserved for all of the ecological value that they hold. We take the government's power to conserve land permanently and put it in the hands of the people, the individuals who own it. Land trusts tend to be small organizations working on the watershed or the county level. And while a lot of people see this small size as a weakness, we actually see it as a strength. You see, being small gives land trusts access to a suite of tools that the big players just don't get. Chief among them is our ability to form close relationships with what I call the 3 Ps: property, partners, and people. Land trusts rely on these relationships to inform and complete our conservation work. But their importance goes even deeper than that. When individuals form and act on these relationships, it creates a bond between a community and their ecosystem. In this way, any person can think like a land trust and leverage their relationships to create climate action. Land trusts have deep relationships with property. As locally focused organizations, we really get to know the ins and outs of our watersheds and working areas, where the most sensitive ecological features lie, how the waterways run, and what routes the animals take to move across the landscape. But we also get to know land on the property level, because land trusts are direct action charities. That means that we're not just folks in an office facilitating a process, although, trust me, I do my fair share of paperwork. When I'm unchained from my desk, I'm also the guy that's scrambling up slopes and trudging through mud and flipping over logs looking for rare and endangered species. When I'm working on a property, I'm not just looking at pictures or aerial photography. I am right there with my boots on the ground. I'm not just seeing the trees, but looking at the species and what's around them. I'm not just hearing the sounds of nature, but listening to the bird songs, the flowing water, and the way the wind moves through the trees. I'm not content simply knowing what is on a property. I must also discover why it's there. You don't need to be a biologist way out in the middle of nowhere to do this. Just like a land trust, you can form a relationship with the nature that surrounds you. Whether you're on a weekend camping trip or an evening hike or just your morning walk to class, take the time to look and listen to the nature around you. Examine a boulevard tree, or the squirrels on the telephone wires, or even the weeds on your neighbor's lawn. Think about why that tree is thriving in that place, or what route those squirrels might be taking around your neighborhood. They are all a part of a system that climate change is disrupting. Land trusts know that understanding the nature in our communities is the first step toward understanding how we can combat the climate crisis. And now, you know that too. Just as importantly, we form relationships with partners. As small organizations, land trusts know that capacity is everything. And sometimes there are organizations that are just better equipped for a project than we are. The land trust, Twilt, has known that for nearly 30 years. And in those 30 years, we've had our hands on over 6,100 acres of conservation land in our area. Of those 6,100 acres, though, only about 30% are directly owned or managed by the land trust. The rest were passed along to our partner organizations. This is an extremely valuable tool because it allows the nimbler land trusts to broker deals and quickly secure land for larger players who may not move quickly enough to do it themselves. In doing this, we can ensure that those properties get protected and eventually end up in the hands of those best equipped to take care of them. For an individual, thinking like a land trust in the context of partnerships is very straightforward. There are organizations all over the place that are doing this kind of work, and they're all connected by the same thread. They need people's time and talent to get that conservation work done. You don't need to be an organization to form a relationship with one. When TWILT first came together, it was little more than a collection of individuals who wanted to make a difference. And within 10 years of coming together, they were on a team that doubled the size of Thousand Islands National Park. Who's to say any one of you couldn't do something similar? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Opportunities to get involved in conservation are all over the province. Case in point, almost every part of southern Ontario has a local land trust that is working to conserve nature in their community. These land trusts know that partnerships are out there. All you need to do is look for them. And now, you know that too. Perhaps most important, though, are the relationships that we form with people. We are deeply rooted in our communities, and those communities would be nothing without the people that inhabit them. Now, we rely on people for more than just donations and volunteer hours, but crucially, we rely on them for their immense knowledge. You see, conservation work tends to prioritize scientific knowledge, but there are other knowledge systems out there that we can and should make use of. Local and Indigenous knowledge are two of the most valuable yet sorely overlooked knowledge systems available to us. These knowledge systems are centered around people and their lived experiences, a vital and often overlooked source of information. Case in point, a couple of years ago, my land trust was in talks with a landowner who was looking to donate his property. This property contained a large wetland that was incredibly ecologically significant, but almost entirely held on private land, meaning the land trust had no way of getting to it. In talking with this landowner, he revealed to us that a burst dam further downstream had actually left that important wetland slowly draining. Now, the land trust would never have known about such a major ecological change had it not been for the local knowledge that that landowner had and was willing to share with us. Ultimately, people are at the heart of the climate crisis. People started it, people are suffering from it, and people need to be the ones to solve it. So if you're trying to take meaningful climate action, think like a land trust and prioritize engaging with people. If you decide to look and listen to the nature around you, don't keep those observations to yourself. Find somebody that you can share them with. If you decide to get involved with your local land trust, encourage your friends to do the same. By sharing our actions and our observations with each other, we can strengthen our own local knowledge system, ensuring that everybody is better informed and thus better equipped for the changes that are happening. My entire climate action journey started with just one person, my science teacher, back in grade 7. If everybody in this room was that one person for somebody else, who then went on to be that one person for another somebody else, and so on, imagine what we could accomplish. Land trusts know that people are the beating heart of conservation. And now, you know that too. Thank you.